Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the management breakout session of the CUNY SPS Virtual Business Conference. My name is Tara Barca. I'm the Assistant Academic Director of Online Business Programs at CUNY SPS, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd just like to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, please submit your questions via the chat function. We will ask questions that are posed by the audience as they fit into the conversation and as time permits. If you do have any technical questions or concerns, please let us know via the chat and we will work with you to solve them. So in this panel discussion today, we will be exploring how trends and issues in the field of management affect business education and industry needs. Joining me as panelists for today's discussion on management, we have Linda Barron, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce. In 2004, the Chamber's Board of Directors elected Linda as the organization's first woman president and CEO. Over her 34-year career with the Chamber, Linda has worked in numerous areas of the organization, including finance and operations, membership development, community relations, and special events, as well as government and legislative affairs. I'm also pleased to introduce Mary Beth Dunaisky, who is the former National Import Specialist for Textile Fabrics within the National Commodity Specialist Division of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. Mary Beth served as a national subject matter expert for Customs headquarters in Washington, D.C., for customs personnel across the nation, and to other U.S. government agencies. She also served as an information resource for custom brokers, advisors, importers, and the general public. Our faculty panelist today is Prudence Pitter, who is an adjunct professor of human resource management and organizational behavior and leadership at CUNY SPS. Professor Pitter is an experienced business executive with over 2 decades of human resource management experience spanning several industries. Our alumni panelist today is Ty Brown, who is the Assistant Vice President at Flushing Bank and is a multiple degree CUNY alumnus. Ty received the MS in Business Management and Leadership degree, as well as the BS in Business degree from CUNY SPS. He also received an AS in Business Management from CUNY Hostos Community College. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Caitlin Barlow, who is our student panelist today. Caitlin is currently a senior who is completing the BS in Business degree at CUNY SPS. And congratulations to Caitlin on your upcoming graduation. I'd like to welcome and thank all of our panelists and audience members for joining us in our discussion on management today. I'd like to begin the conversation by highlighting some of the fundamental skills and qualities of successful managers within the context of our ever-evolving business landscape. It is certainly evident that the skills required of the 21st century manager are quite distinct from those of the 20th century manager. In yesterday's Future of Work session, the panel discussed the importance of soft skills, such as creativity, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal communication in the age of artificial intelligence, or AI. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, managers have refined their skills and strategies in an effort to enrich employee engagement, drive productivity, and cultivate organizational resilience amid disruption. Modern managers are seeking new ways to best utilize the talents of a diverse workforce that largely encompasses the highest number of employees working remotely in history. Learning how to effectively navigate change, uncertainty, and turbulence has become the norm for the modern manager. Although 21st century managers do face many obstacles, they also have robust opportunities to positively impact business results, enhance competitive advantage, and effect meaningful, sustainable change. So Linda, I'd like to start the discussion by asking if you can share a few of the skills or characteristics that you believe to be critical to the success of a contemporary manager.
Well, I would say that one of the most important things, and you mentioned the word communication, is to be an excellent communicator. And in the new world, that doesn't mean just face-to-face. That means being able to communicate with your employees through whether it's project management software, through email, through different platforms that are available. One of the things that I see going forward is really right now you can recruit, people to work for you from all over the world. It's not just in your own backyard. So you're going to have to really be a little bit more open to communicating, but doing that comes a lot of difficulties. I've heard from a lot of employers lately, in terms of hiring, just hiring and training people is different than it's been in the past. You had face-to-face, you had that interaction. Now you have to learn new ways to be able to interact with people, but also, have the ability to get to know them. And I think that's going to be one of the hardest things for a manager, is to really understand their people, to get to know them on the new employees that are coming in also aren't just, it's the dynamic has changed. So you see a lot of younger people that are coming into the workforce that are looking for what is the culture of your organization? It's in the old days, used to, everybody used to come in and basically be happy to get a job. Now they interview you when they want to work for you, because there are a lot of people think more so these days about, what encompasses a nice life balance for myself. So am I happy with my job? Can I have some kind of balance with my family so that I can spend more time at home? A lot of people are looking at organizations' commitments to the community to see, what they're doing to support their community. And they're also looking at diversity and inclusion and really making sure that, businesses are well-rounded and really represent, the entire makeup of the population that we exist in. So I think what really that managers have to look at is being more flexible and really understanding technology and being able to pivot and change in a way that you can communicate more effectively to get your employees to do the work that they need to do for your organization or your company.
Mary Beth, I'd like to move to you. So what skills do contemporary organizations, what are they really looking for in a new management hire?
Well, you had mentioned soft skills earlier, and I think they're still important. Empathy and ability to work with others, because you can get someone in you'd hire someone who's an expert in their field, but if they don't have any empathy, they're not going to get along with the people, and the people will not want to work for them. So I think it's so important to listen to people, get along with people, solicit their input. And especially in these COVID times, solicit suggestions on how to best implement better communication practices, because everyone is so far-flung. And just in my division, 15 years ago, I started before computers. So I've lived through a lot of changes, but 10 or 15 years ago, everyone in New York was everyone in the New York office was located there, and no one did teleworking. And then 5-10 years ago, they started implementing teleworking and remote workers. So we've been working on that issue for a few years and managed to get some of the kinks out and bring people in for training to get to know them and then send them home. But it's easy to communicate if you've met the people, if you know the people. You're not likely to pick up the phone and call a colleague if you don't have any sense of who they are. So we do try to encourage online get-togethers and online meetings just to see how things are going and to share what issues are you dealing with today. Communication is.
Mary Beth, I think you may have gotten muted.
Yes, okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, my fervent belief is lack of communication is one of the roots of all evil, and most problems can be solved by more communication. And so it's a little harder these days, but we have more tools.
Thank you. Ty, I'd like to ask, which of your skills do you think has been most critical to your success and growth as a modern manager? And how did your business education prepare you for success as a manager? And you could just unmute yourself, Ty, if you would.
My apologies. I thought you guys were doing that anyway. It's ironic. It's ironic that I chose back in 2012 to go to school full-time online. And it's an experience that ultimately was, I guess you could say, a foresight as to what the future was going to hold. Subsequently, being in that, I was a part of the CUNY family in the SPS. I kind of look at myself as being both a benchmark at my employer, as well as someone that can help guide some of the people that are having troubles right now with the pandemic, how to do business on a day-to-day basis, more remote than less. Subsequently, I just spent, I guess you could say, the better part of 8 years doing what everyone is being forced to do right now at this point in time. So I always find it critical that managers, such as myself, as we foster our careers, as we try to grow as individuals, and as we try to help better businesses, try to look a little beyond the present and more towards the distant future. That's how things are going to transcend. My education with CUNY taught me how to both communicate electronically. It taught me how to be assertive and be more disciplined and with scheduling and with being more objective to others, not just on a face-to-face, but also, how can you say, behind the screen. It also taught me how to use technology in facets that most people probably didn't intend to be utilized towards. Good point in case is what we're doing right now. We're conducting, video conferencing, and in the past, businesses had video conferencing, but they never utilized it to the extent that we're utilizing it today. We're actually doing teamwork more than just basically sitting, behind screens having meetings. We're actually interacting. We're actually collaborating. We're innovating, using the tools of today in order to try to benchmark where we're going to be as a business and as students and as scholars tomorrow. So I look at it as the school offered me an essential component that gives me a competitive advantage, because I can take advantage of things that many that are struggling now don't know how to succeed by, and also be a greater leader by helping them to succeed by the knowledge that I can give them on how we transcend 10, 15, 20 years from now, ago, to where we're going to be probably 10, 15, 20 years in the future.
Hi. Prudence, I'd like to get the educator's perspective on this. So can you discuss how educators can prepare business students to anticipate and meet these rigorous industry demands that they are facing?
Absolutely. It's a matter of real world examples. One of the things that I live by, if you will, in my course, week by week, assignment by assignment, is including real world examples. And I know enough not only to include my examples, but to ask the students to share their examples as well. Because while students are taking an HR course to learn more, they bring a lot of knowledge to the table that sometimes they don't recognize is relevant to the topic until the description and the conversation begins. So I really focus on helping students connect the dots and understand different scenarios. And I find that the biggest learning happens when they share with each other. So I have 24 plus years of HR expertise, and I've worked across industries. But every semester I learn from my students. There's always something new that I learn about that happens in an organization. There's always a article that is shared or information that's shared. And that's where students are able to be prepared for a job change or a career change or their first job in a long time. Because I have students with different goals for their degrees. And when they truly understand what's happening in the workplace now, what has happened in the past, that helps them be prepared for the future.
Much. Now I'd like to get the student perspective. So Caitlin, can you describe how your experiences as an SPS business student have prepared you to achieve success in the workplace, and when you enter, or if you currently are in a managerial role, for advancement in that role?
I feel like Ty actually said it best. We have chosen this path at SPS of being online and being virtual from the beginning. So I feel so much more confident now heading into the workforce, hopefully in May, being already familiar with most of the technology and ways to communicate that we have. I just feel like we're in a great spot moving forward, and there's nothing more calming, I guess, than confidence heading out after graduation.
Thank you. So next I'd like to pivot a bit and ask each of you what effects the COVID-19 pandemic has had on your own management practices, And how have you pivoted to overcome these obstacles that we've all been facing? Linda, can you start?
Sure. So I have a team of 10, and typically we used to working in the office every day, but immediately we had to start working remotely, and thankfully we had the technology to do that. But I have to say it forced me, even myself, as someone who's a little bit older, to work with some of the different softwares that I didn't work with before. So our board of directors has talked about, having virtual meetings, and we kept saying, hey, we're going to do it, but we never actually did it. So, immediately now everybody's on the virtual meeting. Everybody loves it. There's a couple of people that have a little trouble with it in the beginning, but they got accustomed to it. I think, though, for managing my team, I think it's been very helpful to me, actually, technology. We do a Zoom meeting every single morning and everybody touches base, so everybody knows what everybody's doing. We also use a project management software called Basecamp, which I absolutely love because everybody logs in every day. It's a nice team collaboration, so you can see what each person is doing, so that, I think a lot of times when you're managing people, there's always like a riff in the office, whether somebody thinks somebody's working harder than the other person, or that this person doesn't have as big of a workload. And I think this is very transparent. The team gets to see how everybody's contributing in their own way, because everybody gets to see that. So for me, I think it's really opened up the line of communications. I mean, I do miss that in person, one-on-one, that because the other piece of it is you also, as a manager, want to bring in a little bit of a funness or lightness to some of the things. So some of the meetings, before like when we had our Halloween, just before Halloween, well, what's your favorite candy? Just having like a little conversation beforehand. So there's a little personalization going on rather than just straight get to work every day. So I think you have to kind of meet it in the middle a little bit to make sure that, you're communicating with your people in a way that you care about what's going on with them, in their home life, or just something that's just, it's not just that you're asking them to do this job every day, but they're part of the team that you truly care about.
Mary Beth, would you like to share kind of your experience and some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome during this time?
Sure. As I had mentioned, every government, after 9/11, every government office had to come up with a disaster preparedness plan. And that's when really the government started getting into teleworking. So we've been working towards this for many years. And a number of years ago, we also started hiring remote workers. So we have people based in California, North Carolina, all over the country. So up until COVID, people were allowed to telework up to 3 days a week. And then we were forced to go 5 days a week. So we already had the systems in place. However, there were people in the New York area who came into the office every day because they were not comfortable being online or preferred to be on location. And so those people ended up having to be dragged kicking and screaming into the computer, the remote teleworking age. So our office had to make sure that they had computers at home and good connections, good internet lines. But even our gentleman in his late 70s tried working at home and loves it. So everyone has adapted very well to working remotely.
Thank you. Prudence, would you like to weigh in on this?
Sure. For me, I've worked in various industries, and for the majority of my career, I've been in the service industry. So overseeing HR for hotels and restaurants. I am used to being remote. So I'm used to being the person finding any corner available with an internet connection to get work done. It always seems to work out where I'm in one location, and the support is needed from another location. And sometimes it's confidential information and I don't have a private space, so I end up in my car. So I have been very flexible throughout my career. However, recently, and specifically to your question as it relates to managing others, I found that even though I gave my staff the opportunity to be remote 100% of the time, majority of them prefer to be in the office 100% of the time, which I found to be interesting. Even though we're not a heavily paper-based organization, it's a matter of comfort for some employees. But for me, I feel that I had many of the skills already, but there's something to be said about the flexibility of wanting and needing to work remote because of the job responsibilities versus a shutdown. There was something about the shutdown where you're truly forced, if you will, to be away from the office that just comes with different anxiety. And being able to reach out to my staff on a very personal level to say, how are you doing? And not accept the, oh, okay, but truly ask, you know, I don't need to know it all, but what can I do for you? And offer the employee assistance program. And Governor Cuomo has done a great job of sharing mental health resources. But I found myself this time trying to be more personally connected than I've been in the past without violating privacy or anything like that.
And Ty, I know that you were wrapping up your master's degree in the spring when all of this began, working full time. Can you share some of the obstacles that you had to face and how you were able to overcome those?
Well, quite frankly, as an adult student, you know, a father of four, and a manager working in the financial services industry, you have a full plate, if not an overloaded plate at times. So one of the things that I had to, I guess you could say, overcome was time management. There was often times where you couldn't fit 27 hours in a 24-hour day, but you had to kind of find a way of finding a niche as to how can you juggle both what your academic aspirations are as well as your professional and your personal. So the one credit I can also say is, having great and esteemed professors and administrators within the organization, such as SPS, is essential to success. So I give a lot of credit and a lot of credence to SPS because of the understanding and the flexibility that they bestowed, that we can only hope as managers and leaders that we will also recognize and bestow on our staff throughout our organizations. That I find to be most essential to any enterprise's success. Like you say, it takes a village. Well, also it takes a team in order to succeed. And when you have faculty that are real world, basically they work in the organizations that we work in organizations. They know time constraints. They know some of the microcosms of nuances that are manifest on a day-to-day basis that no matter how much you plan can surface and need to be addressed. So you got to prioritize. And they give you the latitude and some leniency in some senses in order to be flexible with accommodating, but also be diligent to get you to realize you have to do your part. Yesterday during the session, I mentioned a professor that ironically is on this forum as we speak, Professor Stearns. I mean, I got to give him so much credit to my success throughout my master's degree at SPS, because there was times where I was hitting bumps in the road. There was a time where I had to actually withdraw from the class, due to health reasons and so forth. And never was it a thing where it was, okay, I'm just going to leave you cut and dry. You can't make the curriculum. You can't make the assignments. It is what it is. You're an adult. Suck it up. No, it was an understanding. It was a mutual respect. It was a necessary realization that we all want to succeed. The professors want to succeed. The students want to succeed. The institutions want to succeed. And if we can work collaboratively towards that success, we can all succeed. And that's something I've gotten throughout the 8 years of being a student at SBS. That's something that I try to aspire to outside of SBS when I go and I try to mentor others. So I take on mentees left and right. I recognize that you can't just reap the benefits of an institution. You also got to try to give back. So by giving back, by doing these sessions, I find that success is something that is a give and take, but it's also something that you reap more of by giving more of yourself as a service.
Yes, that's an interesting perspective. It is a reciprocal relationship between faculty member and student, and it goes both ways as well as institution and student as a whole.
Correct,
that's a great point. Caitlin, would you like to share some of the challenges that you've had to kind of overcome during this time?
Like I said before, we were pretty much set up for success having, been SPS students, or most of us had been, going into COVID. So we were comfortable virtually. The one biggest challenge that I've found is that when COVID hit, we had to become a lot more flexible and, understanding with our fellow classmates, especially in group projects and things like that. When I first started SPS, everybody was more or less around New York. Now that COVID hit, you know, people lost their jobs, they had to move. I'm working with students that are all over the world, Europe, California, Asia, everywhere. So working, especially in like group projects, which is a very common thing here, you have to be flexible with that. You have to work in different time zones. You know, somebody is, for example, today, somebody is submitting a project for our group that is in Eastern Europe. So you have to be flexible with them and learn to work, which is a great skill to have. I know going into, you know, the workforce later on after graduation. And especially with COVID, you know, if people have kids, they're not only students now, they're also teachers to a lot of their young children. So they don't have the time they used to. Those are really the only challenges that I've found to face. But, you know, it's something that you learn to adjust to and, you know, you get more comfortable with as you go.
Next, I'd like to kind of open up just a question in general about, you know, how can managers really address signs of employee fatigue and burnout? I mean, I know for myself, the Zoom fatigue is real, you know, so how can managers really notice these signs if employees may be hesitant, let's say, to speak up about it? And, you know, should there be policies and processes in place so that employee fatigue and burnout are minimized or at least, you know, addressed in an effective way?
I can jump in on that one. I have advised CEOs and presidents recently on this. The biggest way to address it is by setting the example. I know personal lives are personal and are separate, but a head of a department or a CEO or president who show their employee that they take time away will set the example and will inspire others to do the same. A lot of employees, what they used to do for downtime is no longer available. So they use their downtime as work time. And there's just no good can come from doing that for too long. So definitely setting the examples and carving time out of meetings to truly ask how others are doing. And the way I don't end up with the I'm okay answer and the silence is by sharing and being vulnerable. And I think leaders who do that, who, number one, they're vulnerable and they can say, I had a really difficult time yesterday, seeing that we have 136,000 cases throughout the United States has really broken my heart. I had a difficult time sleeping. I'm thinking of all these things. That will encourage employees to truly share and share how they are feeling. And those employees who, you know, if you're on a Zoom, you know, if I take a look at just what I'm seeing right now and the 6 of us, and there are 4 or 5 of us who are participating, I really want to hone in on that individual who's not participating and touching base after to say, hey, I don't want to pry. I just want to be able to provide resources if you need them. But I noticed you didn't participate, or I noticed you weren't yourself. Is there anything I can help with? And sending out regular communication on different channels. So Zoom is comfortable for some and it's not for others. A newsletter, emails, allowing employees to see the same message in different places will help, but also giving employees the opportunity to share in different ways, not just on Zoom in front of everyone. Give them one-on-one time with you on the phone or via email. That will help you be able to anticipate their needs and also respond to their needs.
Tara, can
Yes.
I just like to say too, I think, you know, setting expectations. So you mentioned like policies and things like that. Like right now, everybody emails everybody 24 hours a day. So like with my staff, I'll tell my staff, I may send you an email, but I'm not asking you to respond to that email after hours. I'm just don't want you to forget about it. So you need to respond during hours, unless I say emergency, emergency, I need you. So I think as managers, you need to let your employees know where those boundaries are so that, you know, they don't think that they have to work 24 hours a day. In this type of environment, especially now, I think there's a lot of people that really feel, you know, obligated to do so. And I think as a manager, you have to let them know. And I do think that you also have to recognize, as Prudence said, you know, when somebody is shutting down a little bit, or maybe they're not showing up in time for that staff meeting because they're doing something else and they're spreading themselves too thin. So having that side conversation with them to find out, you know, what's on your plate, and let's go over your priorities to make sure that they're hitting the things that are most important and not just kind of spinning their wheels and trying to please everybody by doing every single thing. Because, you know, as Ty said, you can't work 27 hours a day and 24 hours a day.
Right. And that's so true. I think, Tara, if I was going to chime in, another good point would be, you got to be realistic. Sometimes managers lose cognizance to realities. Sometimes we look at deadlines and we look at, you know, bottom lines and we look at profit margins as being driving forces to reality. They're driving forces to the business, but it's people, and people first. So I find that the more cognizant you are to the realities that even you have limitations. You know when you're hungry. You got to only wonder, are my troops hungry? Because if I just been on a 3-hour call, or if I've been in a meeting back to meeting back to meeting, and I know there's the same faces in these meetings, I got to wonder, if my stomach is grumbling, maybe somebody else's is. If I got to use a restroom, maybe somebody else does as well. So when you show that you're more cognizant to the individual, they show the appreciation to know that they're not just an employee, they're not just an employee ID number, they're not just, you know, another component to the profits. They're actually somebody that's a part of a unit, somebody that's part of a family, somebody that's part of something bigger and greater than themselves. So they feel more to buy in, and they feel more, you know, I guess you could say, like a conduit to want to do more. When they even do more, you still got to be conscious and realize sometimes people aspire and they push themselves to the brink of, because they're either trying to move up the ladder, they're trying to show that they're loyal to the organization and the system. And one of the things that I've done with my staff, I share my calendar. So they see my calendar. So they know where I'm at. They even see what I'm doing today. So I let them know that this is what my calendar is. This is my little break periods where you can reach me, or here's where I go to lunch. This is when I'm having breakfast. I try to map things out so they can see that you have to kind of like time management, and you got to share that with them. Show them that that's an option that they can pursue. And then I try to encourage them to do the same. Set off, I need to know when you plan on taking lunch. You ain't got to take it at that time, but at least I need to know that it's on your schedule, that you're thinking about it, because you need some time to go and, you know, blow off some steam or go for a walk, enjoy the sun when the sun is shining, 70 degrees in November. Take advantage of it. It might come few and far between, hopefully, with global warming and all. But at the end of the day, when you're cognizant of that stuff in your own personal life and your own personal, you know, work-life balance, then you try to share that and express that. And as the lady said, you demonstrate that more by you doing it, and then you demonstrate that more by trying to get them to see it and do it, and not feel taking a quick 15 minutes to go outside and go for a quick walk, you know, just to get some fresh air, especially when we wear masks all day and every day and everything else, can go a long ways, can really go a long ways.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Ty and what was said before, that you have to recognize first that people are under stress and what they're going through, and also make them feel comfortable in asking for help. They have to understand that there's no shame in saying, hey, you know, I need a little more time, or I'm stressed out, or perhaps, you know, even something more drastic. Can we do something different? Can I do a different job or different tasking? Because as Ty said, and everyone said, that everyone's going through this. And so people need to understand they're not superheroes, that it's more important to get them through this than to get that project done at that specific moment, usually.
Caitlin, can you briefly speak about maybe some of the things that you've seen instructors do to, because one thing that I, noticed in the beginning of this pandemic was I was thinking to myself, my students are online students and they're committed to their education online, yet now they may be working remotely from home full-time and attempting to teach their children using Google Classroom. It's like an overload of technology. And a lot of my students, I try to convey to them, please reach out to me immediately if you're experiencing any kind of issue or problem so that we can find a solution together. Are there any particular things that your instructors have been doing to maintain a direct line of communication and make sure that you're not getting so burnt out from this overload of technology?
It's interesting because I feel like every professor has handled it differently and they've all handled it really well. I've had professors actually cut a few assignments or, spread things out more to make it easier for everybody to get things done on their own time instead of having one really heavy week. I had a professor that, kind of spread it out instead of one due date. We had multiple spread out throughout a couple weeks. The one common theme, though, is that, like you said, the communication has increased significantly. In previous semesters, you might get 1 or 2 emails a week or announcements from a professor. Now I feel like they're, every 3-4 days, or every 2-3 days. You always feel like your professor is communicating exactly what's going on. There's more reminders of what you need to do, what you need to accomplish, what you should be thinking about heading into, busier times. And it's been extremely helpful. And the flexibility that many of my professors have shown as well, if you are feeling overwhelmed or burdened with too much work in life, or, if somebody in your family is sick, then, if you just communicate them with that. I haven't had any professor, give anybody a hard time about, being a day late or, being inflexible with due dates. So it's really been, a good experience. And, it shows how the professors here at SPS really do want you to succeed and do well.
We have a question from the audience, and I believe it may be directed at Prudence. It's regarding, working on a virtual teaching platform, and what are some of the things that you're incorporating or that you'd like to integrate to bridge, the classroom communication with what's going on in people's lives outside, sharing industry knowledge and experiences. What are some of the tools that you're using to enhance communication and engagement within the classroom?
Absolutely. So I was on a Zoom earlier this week with Dr. Knox and Joseph Foy, and we talked exactly about that. CUNY has provided additional resources for us as professors to ensure that we set our students up for success. So there's a lot that I have been doing for my students as far as communication. So when I started teaching about 7 years ago, the syllabus was almost a secret, right? So I put the syllabus out, but I would make each week available a little before the date. And that was not exactly helpful for some of students, because students are online because they want to own their own time. So now once class goes live, you see exactly what's due. You see the actual due dates, but there's no penalty for working ahead. And some of the tips that I picked up in a recent study to prepare us for this new teaching module, and certainly earlier this week, is additional communication and not just making information available to students because it's convenient for some, but making the information available on different platforms. So for example, if there is a video, make sure that the video also has closed caption, but make sure that the video is available not only when students log into Blackboard, but wherever. If they're on the train and they're looking at it on their phone, make sure that they're able to get the same experience as if they were in a different environment. So adding additional communication layers, as Caitlin mentioned, getting those reminders every 2 to 3 days versus once per week, helping the students feel more connected. Even though we're not face-to-face, we don't necessarily have the ability to raise our hands and get the answer right then and there. Anticipating some of those needs and learning from previous courses and making information available in future courses, ultimately to set the students up for success. It's hard to be in a virtual world and not overload, if you will, the students with technology. That's certainly not our intent, but making sure that regardless of who the student is and what their setup is, they have the same ability to be successful.
Next, I'd like to shift a bit. I'd like to ask each of you, what is one of the biggest mistakes that you've made as a manager? And what did you learn from that experience? Linda, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that for me, it's a little bit different. So I work for a not-for-profit organization and I work with a board of directors. And I think sometimes when you're operating and you're doing the day-to-day as a president and CEO, you have a lot of people to answer to. So, you know, I have a board of directors and I find that I actually think our board of directors and people that surround our organization are great for me because they're experts in their fields and they really can be tapped into to help. We have 600 members in the chamber that are all different businesses and they can help one another. The one thing though that I can say is that one of the hard things that I've had to deal with is managing my staff and the board's opinion on that. And I think that sometimes the board wants you to move in a certain direction. And I can recall one time in my career where I took the advice of the board and it really wasn't what I wanted to do. And it was just a shift of a person into a different position and it didn't work out. And I think you have to follow your gut and you have to stand for your convictions with your staff. And because it's easy for somebody to think that this is the best thing for your organization. And I think you really have to, one of the things that you have to do when you're dealing with a board of directors is really, really state your case and make your case and be strong about it. And you know, sometimes you have to take that chance as to whether it's going to work or not, but really prove. And even this year with our financials at the chamber, you know, I had to furlough some of my staff. And I remember there was a conversation about, well, we can't afford to bring them back. And I said, well, we can't afford not to bring them back because we won't be able to provide the services that we do. And I was very forceful on that. And fortunately for us, our budget's, you know, kind of moving in a break-even position towards the end of the year. And I've been like having a heart attack over that the whole, you know, the last couple of months. But, you know, I think sometimes you really have to, as somebody who's managing that in the day-to-day, really stand for what you believe is the true direction that you need to move into.
I'd like to share a mistake that was made as a manager that what you learned from it.
Well, I'll go as far as saying one of the mistakes over 30 years of managing others that I was noticing a few years back that I've come to terms with is trying to manage with a cookie cutter approach, trying to go into every shop or every operation with the mindset that you do it this way, you go about it this way, and you manage the teams this way. And then coming to realize that when you gather and garner some emotional intelligence, you realize the more essential way of managing others is by assessing what are their emotional needs and trying to establish rapport through managing towards those needs while meeting operational goals. That way, you're not basically pushing people out the door. You're not making people feel as though they're a part of an organization it's take it this way or hit the bricks. And they basically feel like they're a part of something. I say all over and over again, even to my team during team meetings, I can start a meeting, but that don't mean it's my meeting. It's our meeting. So that means I should be learning as much as I'm trying to teach or trying to preach or trying to manage what we need to do for the organization. That way, you have people that come up with innovative, ways and means in which to get their jobs running smoother. That way, your job as a manager runs smoother because there's less nuances that surface. And then, as we all been discussing, communication. That way, I find, and I know Prudence can probably talk on this even better than I can, being in resources for so many years, so many people feel as though communication is tell me what to do or I get told what to do versus, the reciprocal. You tell me what you should be able to do. You tell me how this can move effectively. I'm not an accountant. You're an accountant. So you tell me how this accounting can be done more concise and more readily and at a faster pace. I'm not in operations. You're in operations. You tell me how this operation is basically driven through microcosms that I might not see on the surface because I'm doing it from a more top level and high tier approach. But you know this. This is your baby. This is your pet peeve. No different than I always use analogies. It's like if I'm going to babysit your child, you know your child. You're going to tell me when it likes to eat, when it likes to drink, or when it likes to go to bed, or what it needs to do. I might have 4 children or 40 children. That doesn't mean your child is going to respond the same. And I always look at businesses as a living, breathing entity like a child. It starts, so it's born, it's raised, and it grows. And if we take it upon a village approach, we are all going to make sure it grows in the right way and in the right capacity.
Kind of leads into an audience. Sure, an audience member actually asked too. How do we balance between being a micromanager or completely hands off?
May I answer that? Because that's actually what I was thinking. In our organization, certainly we try to hire future team leaders, future managers. And my biggest mistake, thinking back on it, is sitting down and trying to teach someone this is X and this is Y. And I found pretty quickly, I saw the eyes glazing over and the attention wandering. So I changed to, here's the issue, how would you solve it? Explain, and in our case, give the legal citations, explain how you arrived at this decision, because that not only teaches them, it helps us, because we're training people to replace us. And so I'm not trying to hoard information, I'm trying to pour it into the next generation. And so the better able they are to make their own decisions and learn on their own, the better off the organization is as a whole. So you feel more secure having a lot of people that are rising up through the ranks that are worthy of being mentored and rising into the top echelon.
If I could add, Tara, I don't think there should be one way. I think it should be based on the situation. When I hire someone new, I say to them, I am going to micromanage for a short time until you've proven that you don't need it. I like to give employees the opportunity to ask questions, but to show what they're able to do, especially now in a virtual world where we're so far apart from our employees. There's definitely more communication and more management, if you will, that is needed. But once an employee has proven themselves, I think there should be somewhat of a hands-off approach with appropriate communication in between. Even the best of employees, if left on their own, could waver, right? Either get sucked up by another company and be great somewhere else, or just lose interest if they feel that their manager doesn't have interest in them. So regular communication. I have employees who want their weekly meetings, and I have employees who would prefer not to have a meeting. So I schedule the meeting for those who want it and invite them. And I schedule the meeting for myself for those who don't want it and just check in. Hey, do you have a minute? And I think getting to know your employees, knowing their abilities will help you as a manager determine how hands-on to be and when to micromanage. And at some point, just be in the middle and have great communication.
We're just about nearing the end of our session, unfortunately, but if in closing, I'd like to just ask each of you to briefly give one piece of advice to help business students make the most of their education journey. And Ty, maybe we could start with you.
Love that question. That's always the finisher. All I'll ever express: network, network, network. If I known then as I know now, 40 years ago, I'd have did it so much sooner. I know people that's been in the industry for close to 50 years. And then they just realized late in the game, it should have been networking all along. Networking as a student is basically tying into the person that's with you, going to graduate with you, before you or after you, and just keeping a segue to where you can have a resource down the line. You'll have not necessarily somebody who's going to break bread with every day, but you can have someone that's in the industry, yours or otherwise, that you can reach out and get some input and some free advice and ultimately help you try to navigate some pitfalls or get out of some quicksand. And by establishing that early on, by the time you get midway through your career, if you want to pivot to another career, you already have the Rolodex, as they say. If you want to turn around and catapult your career, you can reach out to people that might be a CEO or president that you can say hello to, say happy birthday in LinkedIn or something. And that's, again, a segue for you to rise to where you might not have been able to rise before, just by, the commonality of having them in your network. So I can always express network, 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 because the days of tomorrow is going to be so virtual. You're not going to probably be sitting at a bar somewhere, rubbing elbows with somebody anytime soon, finding where the next gig is going to be.
Thank you. We do have to close the session, but maybe if anybody really has a burning piece of advice for to make the most of your education journey.
If I could just add tutoring and public speaking, offer to tutor other students, because the best way to learn a subject is by teaching it. And that way you learn empathy as well. But teaching another student helps you understand their difficulties. Not everyone's a whiz kid. And just public speaking, when I was in college, the teacher would call on me and I wouldn't answer. I was so shy. And people now say that they're surprising. And I volunteered to teach because I knew I had a problem with public speaking. And then I went around the world teaching and speaking and giving presentations and webinars. So I think public speaking is a really good skill to have.
Thank you.
Don't be afraid to reach out to your mentors, your professors for advice and guidance, because sometimes when you're looking for that first job and you're struggling and you don't think you can find anything, it's the people around you who maybe can help you.
Well, thank you so much. We could have definitely spent a lot more time talking about these various issues today, but unfortunately our session has come to an end. To close, I'd like to thank all of our panelists and audience members for participating in this panel discussion. We hope that you enjoyed this session and that you'll join us for the next session. Have a great rest of the day and stay well, everybody.
Thanks, Tara. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.